Today's episode is sponsored by MasterGraphics. Visit them at mastergraphics.com.
Aerospace and defense manufacturing.
Machines and automation.
Additive manufacturing.
Smart manufacturing.
The global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing.
Hello and welcome everyone to SME Media Podcast. Our guest today is Kevin Carr, CEO of M5D, and today we're going to be talking about 3D printing and additive manufacturing. Kevin is the CEO of M5D, formerly MasterGraphics. His primary responsibilities include leadership, growth, and vision for the business unit, which includes hardware sales, service support, and implementation services. M5D's offerings include both traditional 2D wide-format print solutions and the latest in 3D printing and prototyping. Kevin has extensive experience around 3D printing and additive manufacturing, having assisted clients in utilizing printers ranging from powder to metal over the last 12 years. So today we're going to talk with Kevin a little bit about the state of additive manufacturing and what's going on at M5D, formerly known as MasterGraphics. So first, Kevin, question I want to ask that's probably on a few people's mind. Can you share why MasterGraphics was rebranded to M5D?
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. And first of all, of course, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time and all you do as an organization. But yeah, we went through this rebrand because MasterGraphics is around, over 70 years. And when you hear that name, you think that we're a graphics printer. And over the last 15 years, we've really evolved with a focus on additive printing or 3D printing. And so I felt it was time to rebrand to help us kind of place a new framework of how we interact with our clients. And so MasterGraphics screened something we didn't do. M5D is a little bit more generic. And what I'm hoping it does, it gives us kind of this dimensional framework. We're working with customers on how do they improve their profit, their shortened time to market, how do they get return on investment. And so we've kind of rebranded to, again, provide a framework of more convey what we do, but also work with our clients to make sure we're improving their businesses. So anyways, that was the main thing. We're excited about the rebrand and just and hopefully represent what we do better and be better partners with our potential clients and for the industry as well.
Sure, that makes good sense. So how do you see the current state of the 3D printing industry? It's a kind of a new, still burgeoning market. There's a lot of excitement around it, a lot of hype still too as well. But how do you see the current state of the 3D printing industry?
And it's been a very complex last 2 years, right? So I actually think we're a little at a state of disillusionment, meaning, early on prototyping, tooling, and fixturing took over and things rapidly grew. And I think if you follow the markets over the last 2 years, we've had a lot of OEMs go out of business. We've had a lot of companies who didn't successfully implement additive as promised by our marketing. So I actually think there's a lot of disillusionment in what we're doing. But on the positive side, I think with some of the noise going away, I actually think there's a lot of opportunities. And I see a lot of our clients and those in the industries really doubling down where additive has been effective. We see it in the automotive sector. We see it in O&P. We see it in medical devices. So it's interesting. As someone who's very passionate about the industry, I actually think we're fighting to gain some momentum back because of our stumbles in some of that. And I think some of that disillusionment is good because people aren't buying printers just to print or to additive manufacturing. I think there's got to be a real business case, and that's probably a good trough to come out of. So again, I think we've had a lot of headwinds, but on the other hand, I think where it's working really well, and I'm seeing people double down on those investments.
Yeah, I've definitely caught wind of some of that same disillusionment you're talking about, some of the overhype early on and some disappointments, since when at Rapid. And that was, of course, the big additive manufacturing industry, event that just happened. So fresh off of Rapid, what stood out for you from the show?
It's interesting. I'm talking about disillusionment, but I would say that I was actually reinvigorated after going to Rapid. And it's because it's becoming less about the equipment and more about the workflows, meaning it's about the applications and where things are solving. So if you go around to the booth, we used to booths, a lot of the manufacturers or OEMs would print, I would say, prototypes or gidgety things. Now, the one thing about Rapid that got me excited is there's a lot of great Rapid, like use case scenarios and applications that are being proven. So I think that was really exciting to me, the expertise in the new design thing. So again, it became less about the technology, but the application in that process, whether it be on the design side or even on the finishing side. So actually leaving Rapid, it kind of reinvigorated me of a lot of the really good things that are happening versus the bad press you might read about when, again, everything's going on in the publicly traded markets.
Yeah, I certainly didn't mean to indicate that there was only disillusionment. I saw a lot of excitement at Rapid too. A lot of kind of people getting more in line with the reality of it, and kind of realigning their strategies and getting very excited about that. But there's still a lot of barriers out there too, and I heard a lot about that. Where do you see as some of the biggest barriers, or maybe some of the biggest opportunities for adopting 3D printing today?
Well, I think probably from barriers is internal alignment, and I don't know if I'm saying this right. Going back to kind of why we've rebranded, and one of our dimensions that we talk about is an alignment. And when you're adopting new manufacturing processes, this doesn't really matter if it's 3D scanning, whether it's new injection molding, whatever it might be. One of the biggest, I think, challenges is really getting the culture to think about how can we leverage this. And, I'm getting older now, so it's kind of scary, but the older generation sometimes doesn't adapt as well. And so what you really need is an organization that has some tops down driving that says, hey, let's improve the way we're designing. And really, it's not just about the printers I was talking earlier, but it's about the way we design, the tools we use to design. So I think that's probably the biggest barriers we see is sometimes the overall company or divisions aren't buying in. And once you get that going forward, then I think you can really use the technology. And I just your disillusionment where we were talking there earlier, and I don't like to be negative, but I'm also pragmatic, a realist on it. I don't think additive solves every problem. It's a piece of the tool. And so, no, I'm very excited about it. So I don't want to focus on that disillusionment, but I think like when everyone's on board and really understands how to use that additive technology as a tool, that's when things really start to accelerate. So, and then on the positive side is just the applications that have happened. I talked earlier about OMP, aesthetics or orthotics and prosthetics, huge growth there. We've seen it in the medical world, even in automotive. When you look at all the new electric cars, we're seeing a lot of additive helping drive those new iterations and faster iterations of vehicles. So there really are a lot of great applications out there for sure that we're seeing.
Yeah, and that definitely echoes a lot of the themes that we heard at Rapid too, that additive may not be the end-all be-all, but it's a very important tool in the toolkit. That's what we heard quite a bit. That's definitely the case. I agree with that as well. So with the different 3D printing technologies that are out there, what technologies or maybe what applications do you see as being the most impactful?
Yeah, it's interesting. I bucket it into three things. On what I would call the lower end, there's bamboo out there that's create these kind of point of need, a really quick, fast iteration FFF or FDM. And so we're seeing a lot of that on factory floors, like tooling, fixturing, rapid, tooling. So I think on the low end, bamboo is it's one of the products, not since HP or carbon, that I think is changing kind of the manufacturing floor, right? It's affordable. And then you probably also saw, Lawrence, a lot around metal, right? We've seen this in the past, but we saw things like exact metal and one-click metal, these kind of, affordable metal DMLS systems that I also think are groundbreaking. So metal is another one that, again, I see is kind of turning the corner of use. And then the other one, of course, just on the plastic side, we still see a lot of prototyping, a lot of that tooling and fixturing I talked about with bamboo. but you are seeing a lot of final use products that are out there. So I think like those three buckets, kind of the entry level, helping at the tooling and fixturing, the metal doing things like, firearms, a bunch of other crazy stuff. And then, of course, on the plastics, we're seeing really this crossover where we're starting to see produced goods that are, being used in end use applications, which clearly has been part of our growth over the last 2 years.
For sure. Any particular applications that you could share, or any particular applications that come to mind as being particularly impactful, or maybe just really neat?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. There was some people, and I think it's Victiv, that they're taking 3D printed structures to create padding, whether it be for end of arm tooling or whatever. And we think of end of arm tooling, as kind of being these grippers, but they're actually creating some lattice work so that they can have some rebound, some buffering. So I think, I see a lot of the software tools like from 40 Additive and Victiv that can do it. And it's probably another one that I've seen from an application is we're seeing a lot more texturing. So as you're starting to use end use products, you're seeing things like, you can use side plates for cars and just we putting a texture on those 3D prints so that, it actually hides kind of the imperfections. And we see it in today's vehicles, even injection moldings, a lot of have and textures to it. But we're seeing with those kind of customer facing inward cabs like at Caterpillar or an Agco out of Minnesota, where they're actually printing internal cab parts with texture that kind of give it that final use and looks part quality.
Yeah, that's there's definitely a lot of interesting things going on the application level for sure. Now you're one of the experts who's been in the thick of it for long enough and deep enough, really, that you probably have some lessons learned to share that would benefit everybody. Any lessons learned that come to mind about 3D printing that, you would like to share that others should know about?
Well, it's interesting you reiterated. I say it's a piece of the solution, meaning I think we hurt ourselves when we said it's going to replace manufacturing. So I think the key thing is to understand that it's a tool in the toolbox. And you said it earlier, and it sounds like that's just a catchy term, but the reality is that once you build it into your manufacturing process, that's it. And as I said earlier, the second one is just kind of that overall commitment and alignment internally. Like, what are you going to do with the products? I see too often people bought a printer because they thought it was cool or they didn't really have an application. I think the other thing we learned, if you're not aligned internally, you can have a boat anchor sitting in the corner. And that's where I think it gets frustrating because you invest $50,000 to $500,000 on a 3D printer equipment and you haven't changed your processes, whether it be from a design sale, whether it be a software in your customer interface. So I think that's where probably the biggest lesson learned is to make sure you have alignment in how you're going to utilize the equipment, and then how are you going to improve that? You need a closed loop so that as you're learning, how the technology works, that you're really leveraging it properly. And so again, alignment always, it seems like a buzzword, but I think it's probably the key thing so that you can improve the overall process from design to print to finish.
For sure. That's another thing that I heard quite a bit about last week was the importance of your best practices, of kind of getting your best practices, getting them solidified down on paper, and also sharing best practices so that the entire industry benefits and so that you benefit from others as well. I think that's an important area. I'm going to go back a little bit to applications here again and kind of broaden it a little bit to industries. You mentioned automotive, I believe. I think you touched on a couple others. Where do you see as the biggest industries that are really going to benefit or that are going to benefit more than they already are with additive?
Yeah, it's interesting. I still think a lot of industrial manufacturing benefits, right? If you look at it, and again, I'm probably Midwest focused in the way that I view, we don't have as much aerospace in that, but I think industrial manufacturing, again, we have, clients from, Graco to Milwaukee Tool. And I think they're going to continue to see advantages of additive. And again, it goes beyond just tooling and prototyping to final use. I mentioned it, I keep going back to it, OMP, but even medical devices, right? You're going to see, again, quicker iterations of of not only devices, but then even some of the things that we use, surgical tools. We're seeing things like Mayo Clinic, where we're printing models, right, for them to use. So I think that will continue. And then I think you're going to see some unique industries. Like, it sounds odd, but like consumer goods. We have a customer who does like basically figurines that you scan they scan your body and then they print it. I think additive manufacturing is opening up new markets on the consumer side because we're asking for so much that is customized or personalized. We're seeing things like HP with some of their computers printing specialized. So I think that will continue to accelerate for sure. And it's probably where I see the most impact.
Okay, great. Now, one of my final questions, not the very final question, but one of the final questions here, is about the next 3 to 5 years. What do you see in the industry, kind of bigger in additive manufacturing or, in manufacturing generally, but also specifically, what do you see as the vision for M5D in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, my vision of 3 to 5 years will be interesting because of the tariffs in some of the challenges as we bring manufacturing back. But kind of to build off the theme in where I like as a company where we need to focus, the print technology is just one piece. I continue to see the design side changing rapidly. I think AI is going to affect the way we create and design parts. And you see things where, like NVIDIA is working where you can talk and create a 3D printed model. I think we're going to see generative design take off to a different level. And so I actually think where we're going is we're trying to find tools that make it easier to create the data needed to print. And then, of course, on the back end, we continue to need to improve the post-processing and in automation, and so I think the other limitation is we can print pretty fast, but in the hidden secret in 3D print is you got to pull the parts out, you got to finish them. I think we're going to continue as a company to evolve and bring automated processes for finishing so that you can get to a final use product or part with less intervention or more automation. So I think beyond just the printer, like I said, not only the industry, but us at M5D need to focus on kind of what I would say the data creation, the markets, the automation, the AI, and then of course that back end. So I think we'll continue to evolve our solution and support to really address those needs to really make sure you're leveraging additive effectively.
I'll definitely be interested in seeing in where some of those thoughts end up in the next 3 to 5 years for sure. I think it's definitely an exciting time that we're in. Now I'm going to end with kind of your biggest picture thoughts on how you think things have progressed. Have they has additive really met your expectations, your customers' expectations, and what do you think are some of the things we're going to see in the future, maybe that not everyone is aware of yet?
No, it's interesting. I'm at the high level. No, I think in 85% of our installs, the end users see the results. In fact, I said I was in the print industry forever, 2D print, and I said people needed them. They help their business for workflow. Additive or 3D print has changed people's businesses. It's driven new revenue. It's shortened their time to market. So I continue to think that in most of our cases, additive has worked. Again, where it's going to go, I think I was listening to one of your other podcasts, but I think we're going to continue to see improvements in standards, right? Can we put standards around additive so that we can leverage them? And I think that's going to be a big piece of it. So like I said, I have a lot of hope that it's going to be more adopted standard manufacturing processes, and we're going to see those standards in place. So there's no longer this kind of, hey, we need to test it. We don't really believe additive. I think we're going to continue to see it. We've seen it with GM. General Motors now has a spec for additive in certain cases that suppliers can use. I think we're going to continue to see that type of specifications and industry standards being out there that allows for a wider adoption because we can trust it.
All right. Thank you very much for all of that information. A lot of good stuff to think about for sure. And thanks for joining us today. I want to, thank you, Mr. Carr, and everyone on your team for setting this up, getting this information out to our audience. And you shared a lot of great insights. It's been really informative for me personally, and I expect it has for our audience as well. I do have one last question for you. If our listeners or anyone out there wants to learn more about M5D, where should they go to get more information?
Yeah, of course, you can just go to M5D.com. You can always reach out to me at kcar@M5D.com. And like I said, I'm always willing to even talk just because I'm passionate about the industry. So I appreciate you having me on, Lawrence, and the great conversation. And hopefully I sounded somewhat intelligent, but I appreciate the time.
Yeah, you definitely shared a lot of good information. I think that was beneficial to everyone who got a chance to hear it today. And if you want to learn more about the latest manufacturing trends and hear more podcasts, you could subscribe to our podcast feed. And of course, you can visit us at advancedmanufacturing.org.